the idea of figuring out what words mean and being able to express them to another person, I'm saying, is just as beautiful and just as wonderful as handing someone a bouquet of flowers. Whether you grew the flowers or picked the flowers, or whether they're, I one time went on a walk, a hike with some other friends, and I found a bunch of what you might call weeds, dried grasses, and it was just, but there was a certain beauty to them, and I remember collecting this whole a whole bunch of these. They weren't what you'd find in a florist. They were kind of savage bouquet. Beautiful. Anyway, but the point is, trying to figure out what these words mean is kind of like just going to pick a bouquet of flowers. Or to turn around, little children go out and pick some flowers and come back and give it to mom. And it's dear to her heart. Do you think Elohim feels the same way as we're looking at his stuff? It doesn't matter what those other voices of the disparagers say. This is a personal matter between you and him, between you and your loved ones, to talk to them about, hey, look what I found in this language. Beautiful thing I found. Because when you find one of these meanings of words, meanings of letters, it's almost like a window opening up into a whole nother dimension of insight, of appreciation, of beauty, like a breath of fresh air, like catching his ruach. And yet there's no other way to express it than for somebody else to also see that ruach in each letter. That's the zodying of the paying of the ayin, of the samik, of the noon, coming from the mem, and what's in the mem but the lameting of the kaf, the teaching and learning of the words of his Torah, which he gave to those. They're his personal possession, that's the yod, but he gave to them because it's the full basket inside his pasture, the tet of his chet, which only those who have, you might say, zioned the mortality and crossed over that vav. Crossing, to be Hebrew is to cross over. Vav is a bridge. Vav is like drawn like this suspension bridge to go from this side to that side. So the vav isn't just, oh, that's number 6, that's man. It's the Hebrew. Hebrew means to cross over, to ford a river. To Abraham crossed over from Ur of the Chaldees, his forefathers' place, to the land of Canaan. Noah in the ark crossed over from the era before the flood to the era after the flood. It was the Vav was the journey on the ark for a time. So if we Vav, why is the Vav number 6? Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zion. Well, Zion can be a bunch of different things, but if we're Vaving over a Zion and there's the Het, if Het's like a castle, Zion could be seen as a moat, separating anybody else from the castle who doesn't Vav. Again, it's like, is that witchcraft? Is it Passover? Is it Yeshua being crucified? If someone can't or won't read the New Testament, they're not going to appropriate Old Testament letters and stories to the New. The Jews are not going to allow themselves or each other to see the things in the New Testament and vice versa. The New Testament mind, it's blasphemy to look at the Torah of the Tanakh. I could say it would be easier to wrestle a swine in a mud puddle than to try to wrestle that determined mind. If you're willing, if you're wanting, ask for the Ruach to show you. But if I can read that right here at Mem Noon, that there's this, could be a mud puddle, it could be a pond. What's in it? Are you wrestling pigs, or is it the fish that jumps out? I mean, not good or bad, it's not the mud puddle, it's not the pond, it's something that's in it. How do you pull something out? And what do you see? What's the orthography that you can iron that will sprout unto Kuf Resh, the status of the supreme? Resh, the exalted man. Kuf means after this. After what? After the Zadi. Something has to sprout as a realization. And it's like, wow, this is the Aaron's rod that budded. This is Yeshua coming out of the grave. And then there's this, so Kuf is this transitioning. So on that one chart, both the Vav and the Kuf are drawn as a background of half white and half black. And with the Kuf is half black and then half white, which is to say, both the Vav and Kuf are these transition bridges. Kuf as a word literally means after this. It's also a monkey. What's a monkey do? Monkey, they got these long arms and their tail, and they swing from this tree to that tree, and whoo, these incredible leaps from here to there. That's Kuf, or Kof in that case of monkey. Kuf is the back of the head. It means that which follows. It's a transition. Well, Vav is a bridge, so Vav and Kuf are transitions. Zion and Zadi are weapons. Vav and Resh are men. Number 6, and the exalted man. Pei is an open mouth of some kind of an expression. Hey means to manifest, to show. So as you're pondering all this, it's not a matter of leaving it with the letters and say, oh, now I know what the letters mean. Well, that's good. That's the place to start. It's like knowing how to count. Hey, as a little kid, I know that there's a difference now between the straight line and the curved line. The straight line is a singularity, meaning one. And if you put a bunch of ones next to each other, you end up with a group. You put 4 next to each other and then put one this way. It's a Roman numeral meaning 5, like 5 little lines, like on my hand. It's like, but see, the human brain has to learn that. You might think it's innate, that it's obvious, but that's why we teach children. You teach children to give them, you might say, a boost to. I would guess that if there was no teachers, then children would certainly learn stuff. It's just part of being Adam. You will learn stuff. There was on Royce Hall at UCLA, there's a big sign out front that said, basically, education is the previous generation giving to the next generation the things that it finds to be indispensable. So for one generation to hand off like a relay to the next generation, the best stuff, the most useful insights of understanding, doesn't necessarily mean they're all true. It could be propaganda. It could be fake news. It could be wrong by mistake. It could be an agenda. So each individual can't just rely on the education, but hopefully a good society will lamed, will teach the next generation the very best stuff just to get them going a little faster, a little quicker. Help their brains put things together and build in such a way. There's a little thing. And if I say certain words, I'm going to guess that the robots are going to find this and take it out. So I'm going to say this kind of cryptically. You can find it on the internet. We have talked about things being secret, and we have talked about things being covenant. Yahweh in covenant with Israel. So there is such a thing called a secret covenant. There's a stony man, a rocky feller with a secret covenant. And if you were to look that up on the internet, that stony man's secret covenant, you'll find something that was written up in like 1930 or whenever it was, or where this guy's telling you, it's about a 12, 15-minute video that somebody's recently written up. saying what they're going to do with the educational system and the medical system and the political and everything else, and how they're going to intentionally, let's just say the word minimize or ruin or devastate the mind of the next generation and the next and the next on purpose. Say, what? Who would do such a thing? Well, he's telling you who would. They would. They would do such a thing. Why? Well, they're also telling you why. It's like, how can that be? Well, you maybe don't know how it could be, but whoever wrote that thing, whether it's truly from that Stony guy or somebody just put words in his mouth, but I remember hearing about that like 40, 50 years ago, and so I believe it's true. But what does that got to do with me? Hey, I better learn this stuff. So that little stone that hits the feet of the statue of Nebuchadnezzar's vision and dream and Daniel 2 and knocked the statue down and turned it to dust, and the wind, the ruach, blew the rocky, stony, the metallic dust of that statue. And that stone filled the entire earth with one mountain, and it said it will never yield its sovereignty to another. What does that mean? See, if I take that picture, that a small stone comes out of nowhere, hewn from a mountain, but it also can mean not hewn with human hands. So this isn't a human thing. Hits the feet of that statue. Remember, King of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, was having this dream. The stone hit the feet. The feet were composed of iron mixed with clay. The legs were iron, but it hit the vulnerable place of iron mixed with clay. The statue toppled over, fell, and broke into billions of pieces, dust. The wind blew the dust away, and it was never regarded ever again. And then that stone turned to a mountain that's filled the whole earth. It's like, I remember hearing somebody say, well, that's the return of Jesus. That's the second coming. It doesn't say it is. And also it doesn't explain, if Jesus comes back and we're supposed to go to heaven for a millennial reign in heaven, why is the mountain filling the earth? And if it's filling the earth, when is the event of that statue falling down? Is it before the tribulation or after the tribulation? Or is that the tribulation? In which case, if it's the tribulation, and if this little stone is Yahuwah's rescue of his own people, does that mean his people are going to get tribulated? Or is it the people of the world who are not his people that get tribulated? See, suddenly I have to take everything we were ever told and fit it back into something else that I think has a higher order of credibility. Nebuchadnezzar was a secular king, the king of Babylon. As a matter of fact, he was a nasty dude who caused a lot of pain and suffering, took over the world as best as he could. But yet Yahuwah said, Nebuchadnezzar is my own personal drawn sword. Nebuchadnezzar was Yahuwah's drawn sword. He was the same man who thought too much of himself and went insane for a number of years until he acknowledged Elohim and got his sanity back. More stories in the book of Daniel. A man of historical record. Then the Medes and Persians took over his kingdom. Then Alexander the Macedonian, Alexander the Great, took over the Medes and the Persians, and then Rome took over what was belonging to Greece, and brings us up into the modern age, such as we know, such as we've been told. So he had this vision of this head of gold, arms of silver, midsection bronze, legs of iron. And Daniel gave him description from the revelation of Yahuwah that you, Nebuchadnezzar, are the head of gold. After you will come another kingdom and another and another. But you're the head of gold. So he took that, and he ended up making a whole statue of gold. It's almost like the story reads, like you saying, no, I'm not going to be just a head and then some other kingdom take over for me, which is lesser than me, the shoulders and arms of silver. I'm going to make the entire statue of gold. I'm never giving up my kingdom. Was that after he goes insane? Before he went insane? And maybe that is what caused him to go insane. I'm just saying, as you're pondering these stories, it's just stuff to look at. But see, that's not our concern. Our concern is with Yahuwah in his kingdom. And if he allows the adversaries of his people to be empowered because his people have turned away from his words. And if you look at Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28 and Ezekiel 36 and Jeremiah 21, 23, all the way up to 31, it's all over the place. Deuteronomy 30, when all these things have come upon you, the blessing and the curse that I've described to you today, then you will come back to these words with all your heart and all your soul. That's talking to us. And the way that I see this story is Israel was given the truth. Abraham was given the truth. Ishmael went elsewhere. Isaac was given the truth. Esau went elsewhere. Yaakov was given the truth to hold on to. The 12 tribes, they all kind of spun out. Joseph held on to something. Joseph was regarded the firstborn. Judah was given the firstborn status because his other 3 brothers before him dropped the ball. You got this whole family thing going on. David grabbed a hold of the truth. Solomon dropped the truth. Yeshua brought us back to truth. But then somehow, for some reason, Yahuwah's people didn't hold on to the truth. And so it's gotten completely distorted, perverted, convoluted, morphed. So if I can read the alphabetic sequence that we're now at ayin, pei, zadi, calculate the orthography, somic, of the noon, of the meaning of the letters that are embedded, memming, of the lameting, of the teaching of the kaf, the lines of instruction, which are the full basket of the benefits of being in Yahweh's kingdom, the tet within the chet. And because we acknowledge Yahusha being Mashiach, he's given us the ability to see this narrative story about the crucifixion, the resurrection, the internment as being the critical key which opens up the seal of these words. So when I see in Revelation, what was it, chapter 4, where there's this scroll with 7 seals, and it's like John is going, oh, he's starting to weep because nobody can open the scroll. Not in heaven and earth. Everybody's looking around. Nobody can open the scroll. Why don't you ask Yeshua? No, that's not an option. Nobody can open the scroll. And then the angel says to him, hey, don't weep. Behold, there's one. Look, the lamb that was slain. 7 eyes and 7 horns. What does that mean? Well, what's the Hebrew word for horn? Kufresh nun. The Hebrew word for eye, ayin yod nun. What does this mean? 7. 7 means to swear a vow. There's something about the sworn vow. That's the number 7. Fulfilled, surfeited. When we fulfill the vow, there's an understanding. Yeshua came to reconcile the fact we didn't fulfill the vow. He fulfilled the vow, and whatever that means between Judaism and Christianity, and that's a whole nother matter. But what I'm saying is that that lamb that was slain with 7 eyes and 7 horns, somehow it became the key to opening up the 7 seals. And if the 7 means to swear a vow, then I can look at this Mishkan pattern and say, the 7 Moedim, the 7 days of creation, the pattern of the Mishkan itself, the Beatitudes, they all are talking about the same thing. And to realize that validates every word of the Torah, validates everything Yahusha ever said and did, and who and what he is and was and will be coming. It's all right there in this. And if this is the ayoning, the pei, the zodying, then kuf means after this. So that's in front of us. Are we now at pei zodi? Is that the essence of what this is? Then what's then the kufing unto resh? What's resh? Resh could be him coming back. Resh could be simply us being who we were always supposed to be. But if we're Resh, then what does that got to do with the bad guys? Remember Goliath? He was the biggest, baddest guy. David was a little extraneous, disregarded guy. And David said, how dare you befoul the Shem of the Most High? You're done. The cup of your iniquity is full. You're out of here. Picked up the stone, whack, right into his forehead. Goliath, that was it. So if I choose to see Kuf Resh, Sheen, that this is us. Remember, Elohim didn't make Goliath just fall down of a heart attack or a scorpion bite him in his heel and he fall over and die. David took him out. And it's like, how does this stuff work? We got to be his people. But if I can read back, we can only be his people if we choose life, Chet Tet Yod, learn his Torah, Kaf Lamed, and take it to heart, Mem Nun, so that we do Samik and bear fruit, Ayin, so that the fruit can be edible, edifying for the community. And that same letter Pei lines up with prayers of the saints, the Kadoshim Elyonin, the prayers that he finds as this beautiful, valuable incense. I can start overlaying all these pictures. Okay, back to the chart. What's at Mem here is Yahweh, Maka, Nakam, Le, Kamatzo. So Maka, Mem Kaf Hey, is the word to strike or to hit. Well, that's chaos. That's that word of the crashing of the wave. Yahweh Maka, that's one of the words he uses of himself. So this whole idea of names, a bunch of these words here are things you'll actually see that he says that's who he is. Wouldn't necessarily think of it as a name, but if he says, if you see you used Yahweh Maka, and it's translated Yahweh who strikes, Yahweh who hits. When? Well, if that's Mem and Nun is there, the first thing that you do when a baby's born, you smack him to get him to start breathing. That's what some people do anyway. The point is that a strike of aggression, a strike of wake up and live, or is that a strike of, or just like, hey, pay attention to Yahweh Maka? Well, it's taken as an aggressive thing. But see, if we think, who's your Elohim? His kingdom's not of this world, so he's going to let all his believers get torn up by their adversaries, and then someday in the by and by in the future, we'll resurrect and have a wonderful life. So I guess it'll be worth it. So let's just choose to be his people. Hopefully he won't let too many enemies get too good a hang on us, but apparently there's some really, really rotten stuff going on in Nigeria right now, where the Islamic forces are coming against let's say the Christian people, and horrible, just chopping them up into bits and pieces. It's like, where's the God of the Christians? Why does he allow this? Don't worry about it. They're going to resurrect unto eternal glory. It's like, gosh darn it, there's something about this mortality on the face of the earth that can be so horrible, so horrible. Do we have an Elohim that will intervene or not? I find it personally disturbing to know what's going on, as one example, in Nigeria. These guys against those guys, and these other guys seem to be innocent and helpless. It was like, oh no, they're not. Wait, no. these guys, just like Middle East, these guys seem to be innocent and helpless. These guys seem to be armed to the teeth and full of fury. Why does he empower one and not the other? I don't know the answer to any of those questions. All I know is that Yahweh Elohi, Yahweh is my Elohim, and I have to figure out what he said for me to do. That's all I have. That's all I know. So if I were to believe Yahweh Makkah, Yahweh will visit, Yahweh will intervene, but when? Well, if you read Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, he said when his people wake up and listen and do what he said. So I personally can see what I think I see is Yahuwah saying to Israel, I will intervene on your behalf when you do what I said, walk in my ways. Okay. Then who is Israel? Somebody else? Okay, if I say I'm as Israel, I want to be his people. Now, what does he want me to do? He said very clearly many times, don't work on the Sabbath day. Okay, when's the Sabbath day? The seventh day of the week. Now, some people think that it's keyed by this moon. That's a different matter. But for somebody else, an institutionalized head by a certain person, but an institutionalized group mindset that says we're changing the day from the 7th to the 1st, and then saying every 7 days, starting with the first day of the week, Sunday, we're going to call that the Sabbath day. And you can say, well, the calendar's gotten confused over the centuries, but because very intentionally, they're on historical record of saying, we are hereby changing the day from the 7th to the 1st to prove that we have a greater authority than the written scripture written by the finger of Elohim in tables of stone, or the stuff that the Jews are writing, or whatever is going on. We have a greater authority by our own mouth. Okay, then anybody following that is of an apostate heresy in comparison to the truth of Yahuwah's kingship, master of his own words. And even though they claim to be his voice, his people, his vicarious Christ on the face of the earth, they're the opposite. They're the anti-Mashiach. If the word Mashiach literally means the tangible conversation, and if they said we are changing the conversation as the vicarious Christ written on the headband of the high priest of that institution, it's the opposite. Well, see, the letter mem can mean the opposite. Mem can mean the place of or the opposite. So I can sit here and say, well, Makkah, mem kaf hey, Yahweh Makkah, the opposite of this hand, kaf is an open hand or a cupped hand. So Makkah could be read as the one who slaps or the opposite. Well, the opposite of one who slaps could be the one who gives comfort. But see, if I'm just thinking, is mem a womb, a place of comfort, or is mem chaotic, crashing tsunami? Both? It's just water? Again, the only reason for having these things written in this particular order is for the sake of pondering. And you could write other words. You could make your own chart and just ponder. As you're pondering his stuff and discussing it with one another, you're playing into Malachi 3:16 of getting your name written in his book, just for pondering his SheM, his disposition, his place, his what he's about. And this word nakam, nun kuf mem. Well, kuf mem, kuf vav mem, kumi. Kumi is to arise. Kuf mem is also like ha makom is the place, like digging a hole and planting a post. So it's that which is put right there. Nun as a prefix is to do it or engage in the action of it. Oh, let me sit there and man, I can't. I should have my glasses up here. I can't hardly read this. see if I can find Nun Kuf Mem. I believe that Nun Kuf is means clean and guiltless. Nun Kuf Yod. Wow. Nun Kuf Hem, that's right, to avenge, to take vengeance. He avenged himself. Revenge, vindictive. So there's something about Nun Kuf Yod, clean, innocent, free from guilt, free from punishment. In other words, you could sit there and say, Elohim has told his people, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith Yahuwah, saith Elohim. Don't you go take revenge for anything. That's this kind of understanding that I have had. But he says it's his place and that he absolutely will. But yet, free from guilt or punishment. Kuf Mem Zadi. See if I can look that up. I did write it down in the English version of these words, which I don't have in front of me. Kuf Mem Zadi, to punctuate or pronounce a concern or a consonant. A handful, a small quantity. Spelt to grasp with the hand. So there's a picture I had put on the chart showing like King Kong's, kind of a Hollywood movie poster thing, King Kong's hand with a little stick figure, and it's like the idea of the same hand that can smack is the same hand that can be comforting. The same hand where Yahweh says he's no respecter of persons. If we cross him, we're going to get, we're done. But at the same time, if we walk in his ways, there's a verse where he said, as much as I wasn't kidding, or I wasn't just saying it meaning nothing, that I was going to tear you apart, speaking of Israel, cast you to your enemies, empower them to devastate you. Though I was only a little upset, he was furiously upset, but he said I was only a little upset. He says, even so, even more so, I wasn't kidding when I said that if you walk in my ways, I will take you and bring you back, and then I will unleash a fury against your enemies. See, that's this disposition, this attitude, this ruach, which is still his. So if I read these words and realize the mem is within him, this ruach within him, that he's harboring, that he's holding, it's almost bipolar or it's almost schizophrenic. And he's got these two different attitudes. If you look at the undertow of a wave, this pulling it all in, the crash, the pulling it all in is like gestating, incubating. It's a powerful love that he has for his people if we would just walk in his ways. And for some reason, for whatever, but for some reason, he designed the Sabbath day to be a critical matter to him. Why? It's just a day. No, it's not to him. It's something in this memming of his. It's not just a day. And so therefore, when this adversary changes that day on purpose, it's no small thing. It's not an insignificant triviality. It's the greatest offense that they could muster. It was intentionally the greatest offense that institutionalized attitude could pull together and demand changing the day of his heart. So for Yahuwah's people to say, well, then he also provided that for us to matter-of-factly say we will be his people. We are the people of his heart. He provided the day, the Sabbath day. And in Leviticus 23, it includes the Modim. So for me to take that attitude and say, I'm not going to take on Christmas and Easter and Halloween in particular, but I'm going to take on the Moedim because he said so, because it's his heart, it's his culture of his kingdom, it's his ornamentation. He invented it and dressed himself up with that stuff on purpose and said, this is my identity. His SheM, it's somehow held, retained within those Moedim. So the pool is the Moedim. The pool, which lives inside, is who he is. So I can picture the noon inside the Mem as his true identity harbored within the Moedim. It's not just, well, we're doing Hanukkah instead of Christmas. It's not that at all. But I have to be able to ponder these things, or else I'll never see that. And I'm going to read what's here with the noon. Zadiknu, Zidkenu, Zadi Dalit Kuf is a word for righteous or righteousness, Zadikah. Nun Vav is a suffix, means us, our, third person plural. Our righteousness. Well, that's one of the words that is used, Zidkenu, our righteousness. He is our righteousness. What does that even mean? He is our righteousness. Well, a Christian form of mind would be, he died on the cross, so if I yield to him and say, he's righteous, so if I'm in him, he's my righteousness. That's one way to look at it. But see, the word Zadik also means victory, deliverance, and salvation. So you could say, well, he is my salvation. He is my deliverance. In other words, I'm going to look to him for my victory, deliverance, and salvation. And when I read in the Torah where he said, if you want me to help you, you got to walk in my ways. And I gave you the Sabbath day as the sign that you're my people and I'm your Elohim. And if you don't sit down on Shabbat, there's no evidence you're my people. And he's under no obligation to help, save, redeem, or deliver. So the original question, does God love everybody? Which God? Who are you describing? Yahuwah said that certain people he hated. He said he was going to have an adversary against Amalek for always. And what about the Nephilim? And what about the devil? And what about does he love everybody just because he invented everything? Again, it's who's your Elohim? If I try to be specific and say Yahuwah, the Elohim Zavot of Israel, he loves everybody. Remember when Korah didn't like the idea that Aaron would be high priest because Moshe and Aaron, hey, these two brothers going to rule the country? No way. And he had a bunch of other guys. I think there's about 200 people that didn't like the idea of Aaron being high priest. And so Yahweh said, have them stand over there. So they and their families and everybody stood over there. All of a sudden, the ground opened up and they fell into a big sinkhole. You think that was an expression of love? That was kind of the expression of Yahweh Makkah. Yahweh smites, strikes. Bam! Who's your Elohim? What are his attributes? Ayin, Zion, Resh, Yod. Ezri, Ayin, Zion, Resh. Like the word Ezer, Kenegdo. Kenegdo, nagged. Nun Gimel Dalet is nagged. That's the word used for wife. Ezer Kenegdo, help meet. The one surrounding Ezer. Zion Resh is stranger, like a mat around a picture and then a frame around the mat. Ayin Zion, Oz, is the word splendor and glorious, like a goat jumping across these little pieces of rock that his feet can land on up in the hills and the mountains. It's like, gosh, how do they do that? The bold, dynamic, yet a stranger. The one that's surrounding. In other words, the noon isn't the mem, the noon lives in the mem, the sheep in the pen. So you've got two elements. You've got the surround, you've got the focal, just like the eyeball. Resh, Vav, Ayin, Yod, Roy. Well, that can be shepherd. Resh, Vav, Ayin is also the root of the word teruah, as in trumpet, or companion and associate. The word resh ayin can mean evil, harm, but it also means thought, to think, to shout, to have this intention. Again, the thought in your head is the noon inside the mem, the dot inside the pupil inside the eye. To be an individual surrounded by friends, or to have you surround your friend with your affection, your assistance, your concern. Like the eyeball, this resh vav ayin. The noise of the trumpet, the shout of the trumpet. It can be a battle cry, a war cry, a shout of victory, or a shout of alarm. It's all ruah. It's all like yom taruah. Which is it? A shout of success or a shout of despair? Or a shout of alarm to say, hey, wake up and get ready? It's all those things. It's whatever you turn it into being. Yod resh aleph hey, yirah. Al-tira means do not fear. Al-tira also means do not fear, but lamed aleph and aleph lamed both means no, but aleph lamed means motion toward, as in yes, as in El, as in Elohim. So it's like, that's just the way the language works. It's both yes and no at the same time. Everything has this duality. And so is it Adam's job to manage the duality? So I can sit here and say, I got to make the best use of all my faculties because I'm going to be held responsible and say, what did you, if he's going to visit me, Fachad, and say, what did you do with what I gave you? Well, this is what I did. Yeah, but what about those of us who are not given such good faculties? We're not so good at gymnastics, not so good at thinking, not so good at playing music, not so good at, well, it's like getting your eye punched out. It's like, what the heck? Okay, I know this one fellow, this amazing guitarist, a musician, fellow by the name of John Doan, D-O-A-N. John Doan played the harp guitar, professor of music at Willamette University, done a number of albums, a fantastic, I'd probably say he's one of the world's best musicians. The last day of his career, he just had ended his last term as a professor, was going to retire, bam, got a stroke, and suddenly can't hardly speak, he can think, but he can't articulate, can't use his one whole hand, and it's like, one of the world's best guitarists is suddenly crippled. Good friend of my brother's. The point is, too bad you used to be John Doan. But you used to be the guy that played when he could play, he did everything the best he could as one who was presenting a gift to Elohim, musicianship. And if he's now compromised, he's still not off the hook for presenting his gift to Elohim. He now has to say, if half of him is diminished, he's still John Doan. What does he do now? He has to change his presentation. So he's writing some stuff and giving analysis of music that nobody else can do. I'm giving accolades to the man. The attitude of gratitude is still demanded of us. The attitude of If we can't do what we were doing, so we will be held for all that we accomplished in that capacity. And if we're given a new capacity, we still have to present fakad to the one who says, what did you do with what I gave you? And you can say, well, you didn't give me what you gave to him. He gave us what he gave us. The best we can do is, what did he give me? What did he give me? And what can I hand back as a little picked bouquet of like, here, Daddy, here's a flower. I appreciated the flowers. Yod Resh Aleph Hey, the word tira is fear, but Resh Aleph Hey is to be put on exhibition. Yod Resh Aleph Hey, he will be put on exhibition, or he did put on exhibition. Resh Aleph Hey, what did he read in the dictionary? He allowed himself to be perceived. He allowed you to see. He allowed you to see Resh Aleph. He allowed you to perceive that this Resh, being the ultimate goal, is accomplished by, and then we run through all the other letters like we've done. Interesting thing, I've mentioned that dot, line, dot is Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. My brother brought out that it's also Morse code for the letter R. Hey, that's the, it's really interesting that of all Morse code equivalences, dot, dash, dot is the letter R, which is the letter Resh, which is the goal. I could say Sheen is a beyond the letter Resh and Tav is beyond the letter Sheen, but Sheen to make provision, Sheen, this dynamic, almost as adjective sort of attributes about the Resh, and then Tav is so they're accomplished, end of the Ruach. But Resh stands in the position of this ultimate goal. And so the Vav become Resh is in Aleph Vav Resh. There's something about Resh. And if the dot line dot is Aleph, then all the other letters, 20 letters, then Tav, it's one way to look at it. But you could say that the plan for the Vav man, start there, dot, becoming Resh man, dot, then that becoming, that journey, the memming, the memnooning is that dash. Just a way of looking at it. So Yod Resh Aleph Hey, he puts on exhibition or he makes use of for the sake of perceiving that which he's allowed to perceive. So there's a verse where it says, what you hear whispered in your ear, proclaim from the housetops. Freely you have been given, freely give. I regard something about the comprehension of these matters to be the greatest value, the greatest of, it's more valuable than a diamond or a ruby, which, hey, look at there, the shiny thing. But this is incredible of practical, of reality. And that if he's allowed me to perceive this, how do I make it into a bouquet of a presentation for anybody else to see it, to appreciate it, to comprehend it? I can't charge for that. I don't want to charge for that. That's just my sense. Out of appreciation for what he has freely given me. Though it's been at the expense of a few thousand hours of time. But then this Mem Pei Lamed Tet Yod. Pei Lamed Tet. Pei is like an F or a PH, so it's Pei or FLT is flit, like a bird flits away, and it literally means escape. Mem Pei Lamed Tet is mafleti, my escape. He said numerous places, The one who seeks refuge in his name will escape, will flit. Okay, so that's a picture of the Nun jumping out of Mem, as if Mem is a trap and trying to grab the Nun, and the Nun will get away. Or the one who's safe, so that the one who's trying to grab you can't get in. There's a word, I forget exactly what it is, but it means insurmountably high, as if you're put into a castle that's so high, like the castle in the clouds, that no enemy can get up there. And you can say, yeah, the enemy will just get a catapult, or the enemy will get a spaceship or come up from above. It's like, no, it's insurmountably high means you can't surmount, get above the construction of English words. It's not witchcraft, it's the study of engineering. He promises that if we're his people, walking in his ways, so quit working on Shabbat. Guard and keep the Moedim. Do righteousness. Quit stealing, killing, hating your neighbor, your family. Just stop it. That's being his people. Contend for his ways. If there's an argument, that it should be the argument for contending for his ways of Zadikah. It's like, is that the nooning? If we noon, he said he would be the one who delivers us, the one who surrounds us, the one who watches over us. This idea of yirah, fear, reverence, he's not afraid of us, but to give somebody reverence is to give them a favored regard. He said that he would give his people a favored regard. You alone, Israel, have I made myself known. You alone, Israel, are my segula, my special treasure, beyond the consideration of any other people group on the face of the earth. You alone, Israel. So the same way we have a yirah, a reverential honor of him, it's us having that reverential honor of him that he said gives him, you might say, the allowance for having a reverential honor or endearment to Israel, his people. It's this reciprocal capacity. Just run into Samik here. Ram, the idea of being insurmountably high is Resh Mem. It's way up high. Ayin Lamed, Allah, Ayin Lamed Hey is also like El Elyon, the Most High. That's also lifted up. But Ram is high and lifted up. Nasa, Nun Shin Aleph, is the word lifted up. Remember Mem Shin Aleph? Does anybody have a Masa Yahweh, an oracle, a word, pick up what is his burden? But Nasa is to pick up and carry something. There's a relationship between Mem Shin Aleph and Nun Shin Aleph. So to be high and lifted up is Ram Venasa. Shekin, Shin Kaf Nun, you put a Mem in front of it and it's Mishkan. It's abiding place. Shekin is to live, to abide. Ayin Dalet is a witness, and then Kumo, Kuf Vav Mem, like Kumi, to raise up. Hamakom, the place. I'd have to look up exactly where, but I believe there's a place in scripture where it says Shakan Ed Kumo, high and lifted up his place. Ayin Dalet is a witness. It means until. It's a measure of time. Kumo, the Vav suffix, means here, it. Kum is to arise. It also means him coming back. This idea that he is El Elyon, Aleph Lamed, Ayin Lamed, Yod Vav Nun, the Most High, El Most High. El Shaddai, Yahweh, El Shaddai, Yahweh El Elyon, Yahweh Zavot. If I ponder these attributes, these phrases of adjectives, of verbs, of locations, which would be nouns, it doesn't leave any room for fear. It doesn't leave any room for fear of the weather, fear of the economic handlers of the world, or the medical handlers, or the military handlers. Certainly he does allow and things happen, and who knows why. I can't give explanation for why bad things happen to people. Somehow I just have to keep my heart on him and on his promises. And what I'm saying is, what I'm finding is, by the pondering of these words, that one I just read, Ram Venasa Sheken Ed Kumo, is in the psalmic position. And the psalmic, this vertical, like the trunk with the branches, like a menorah, rising up like the vine, and the branches bearing fruit. The word for, I believe it's dar, aleph dalet resh, means a citrus tree adorned with fruit. There's something majestic about not just when you're planting the vine, or the vine when it's thriving, but the vine bearing fruit. That's in its majesty. If we're his people and we're not bearing his fruit, something's wrong. How do you bear fruit? Galatians 5:22, love, joy, peace, gentleness, kindness, mercy, self-control. There's something about sitting down on the Sabbath day and keeping the Moedim is bearing his fruit. There's something about heralding his name for his majesty, his ornamentation, is bearing fruit. It's not about us. It's about that other people can see that the citrus fruit on the tree. They don't necessarily notice the tree. Yeah, the tree's green, but it's the fruit. The fruit is those bejewelment. The letter Samic, the lit menorah. So if we be the menorah, Yeshua's the vine, we're the branches, we're bearing his fruit. And if he says that the ayin dalets, the ornamentation, the word ayin dalet yod, bejewelment, ornamentation, adornment, are these moedim. Leviticus 23, the Sabbath day. I'm saying these things, we're at the end of the hour here. I'm saying these things so that people have in their mind, how do we give him glory? Let's sing beautiful songs. If you're singing beautiful songs, but you're not regarding the Sabbath day and the Moedim, there's something very wrong. If your worship leader is not telling you that the greatest expression of worship that he told his people to do is sit down and quit working on the Sabbath day and guard what he said to guard, which are the Moedim, by keeping them as a declaration of his majesty. If your worship leader is not telling you that, then your worship leader is leading you astray to some Elohim Achrim, some other deity. Who is your Elohim? I can have an intention, and I can think I'm doing something, but unless I read the scripture, and when I read that he said, you must keep the Sabbath day, and then I hear the church say, we have declared a different day, it's an apostate demon. It's a voice of the devil. And if that's Jesus Christ, then Jesus Christ of that voice is anti-Mashiach. Can't you see that? When I say you, I'm speaking to someone other than can see, apparently, obviously. I had to realize that for myself. I had to realize I was worshiping somebody other than Yahuwah Zavot, who is exemplified by the adornment of the Shabbat and the Moedim. And this language of these words, really serious stuff. And here we are out of time once again. So have fun on this great deep freeze of the January of 24. Shalom Aleichem. I'm going to hit the stop button.